And I will welcome. Okay, and then we're going to just keep people coming in as I talk, but very quickly, and I'll let Phil take over. Really, it's a pleasure to meet Phil back in the fall at an event hosted by the CHP, and I was incredibly impressed by Phil's research dedication and the work that has been done through Peace Education Services. In the notes that I have that I didn't include in the flyer, prior to his involvement with Peace Education Services, Phil was active in the educational field as a teacher, a university instructor for 29 years. And as in the notes here, I have Phil is married to his high school sweetheart, Ruth Ann, and they've raised 3 adult children together and are the proud grandparents of 5 grandchildren. So that will keep you busy for sure, if nothing else. But it's a pleasure to have Phil with us now. And in the flyer and notice for the event, you've got some more Phil's background. He's really been the visionary leader for Peace Education Services, and I'll let Phil take over and really explain the strategy and mission that they've developed through Peace Education Services. So welcome, everyone. And Phil, I'm going to turn it over to you now. We've got your screen share up. So welcome, Phil. Very good to have you.
Thank you so much, Don. As Don said, I spent almost 30 years in public education as a teacher, curriculum consultant, and I did some teacher certification training programs. I delivered them at universities. Right. But about 15 years into my career, I was in a specialty program where kids were bussed into me, and it was a specialty technology program. It was a fantastic job for me because all the kids wanted to be there. It was a great environment, but at a certain time during the year, the kids started calling one another genitalia names, and I'd say to them, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, it's sex ed, sir. It's crazy." Now, this is 1996, 1997.
Yeah.
So I started investigating, and I sat in some classes, and I said, "Okay, where is this curriculum change coming from? What's the research to support it?" And I didn't find any. And I said, "Okay, there's a problem here." And when I'm sitting in the classes watching the instruction, these are grade 7 and grade 8 boys, and most often their heads are down. They don't want to hear this. They're not ready for it. It's way more than they really want at that time. So we started, and it wasn't Peace Education Services at that time. Actually, it was Hamilton Wentworth Family Action Council, which Jim Enos and I started. And our goal was to inform parents about what was happening in the schools and to try and help communicate with the schools our concerns with this, and maybe be able to have some influence over curriculum. And actually, we did have some influence in the first, probably 5, 6, 7 years. But then things ramped up. And it was by 2013, I was asked by an organization to go and do a tour of the state of Hawaii to share what happens to curriculum and education before same-sex marriage is approved and after, because there is a continuum of curriculum change. It doesn't matter where you go internationally. There's a continuum of curriculum change before and then after same-sex marriage. And the reason why I was asked to go to Hawaii is because the state was considering same-sex marriage. So I did. We started going around the state. We shared. And I said, I don't exactly know what's happening in the state of Hawaii, but this is what to look for. Within 3 days, I got to tell you, the lid blew off in the media because the parents found the curriculum, and the churches were saying to me, and this was really tough because here in Canada, I shouldn't say we're fighting the churches. The churches are hesitant to get involved in the sexuality issue.
Yes.
But in Hawaii, the churches came to me and said, "What do we do? how do we engage in this? And I said, well, we have this approach in Canada. And anyway, so they asked me, would you work with us to help set up? So we set up Peace Hawaii. And I had to suffer and fly back and forth 5, 6, 7 times a year and spend, 4 or 5 weeks at a time in Hawaii. And but now it's at the point where they are reaching this ministry in Hawaii is reaching 1,500 at-risk kids a year.
Amazing.
And these kids that they're reaching, and they're working through the churches, many of these kids are homeless. Many of these kids have dropped out of school. And it's wonderful that to see that what we're doing can work.
Right.
And the federal government, the U.S. federal government, has said this is working so well. They have approved us for grants, so we get about $250,000 every year.
Wow.
To implement these programs. So it's working so well. In the last few years, I haven't been flying back and forth to Hawaii because we now have a team there. I just kind of manage from here, but I've been trying to put effort here in Canada.
Yes.
And sometimes people say to me, why do you put so much effort in sex ed? Because sex ed is only 7, 8, 10 hours a year of instruction. That's right. But this is where we can have impact. We can get a foothold in the schools through the sex ed curriculum, because when the sex ed curriculum was changed, and when I say it wasn't changed, but it was reviewed by the Ford government in 2019, they made it mandatory that the schools had to listen to parents. And if parents wanted their kids to opt out, then the school had to accommodate them. So this is an area where we can get a foothold. When it comes to the gender identity instruction and controversial instruction in some other areas in the curriculum, we can't opt out. We don't, but here we have an opportunity, okay? And so that's my reason for the focus. And what I'm going to do today is toward a culture of sexual integrity, and I believe it starts with our youth, okay? And I'm going to go through kind of an overview. What's the goal of a parent? The goal of a parent, and here we use this illustration, is to get our kids from the island of childhood to the shoreline of adulthood, where they can begin achieving their goals. That can be university and college, that can be a trade career, starting a family, a home, and achieving their spiritual goals. But we have to get them across the risky waters of the youth years,
right,
where sex, drugs, alcohol can negatively impact life goal achievement. Not just negatively impact them in the teen years, but negatively impact life goal achievement. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you. Okay. Today, what I'd like to do is cover what are the risks of youth sex, the 2 approaches to guiding youth in the area of sex ed, and we'll talk about the history of sex ed, because I think you've got to understand where this has come from to understand where we're going. And then, okay, how should we respond? All right. So when we think of the risks of youth sex, we always think of the physical risks. Everybody does. Pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections. But the school says, no problem. Take a condom with you and you'll be fine. What we don't tell them is those condoms, when it comes to, for example, the most frequently reported sexually transmitted infection, which is chlamydia, the condoms only reduce the risk by 60% for chlamydia. They only reduce, when it comes to HPV, by 30%. But we don't tell the kids that. The other thing we don't often talk about are the other risks. Whether or not a pregnancy or an STI occurs, early sexual activity has been connected to many other negative lifelong consequences. If kids start having sex at 14 years of age, they're going to have a sequence of failed relationships. And that often continues into adulthood. Poor family relations, reduced academic achievement, regret for sexual activity, which leads to increased depression and suicide rates. boys who are sexually active are 8 times more likely to commit suicide. And increased exposure to this crime, sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and get this. And this is what gets the attention of my parents in Hawaii. Reduced economic achievement. Those who are involved in sex as teens don't earn as much money over their life as those who avoid that. Okay? And, interesting to note that a condom does not reduce the risk of these other risks. And this can lead to negative lifelong consequences. But the research shows that youth who avoid sexual activity have better current, future, physical, emotional, relational, and economic health. Okay? So, are youth sexually active? This is a 2020 study from the Canadian Pediatric Society. We don't get much of this kind of information here in Canada. I am so grateful for this. In the States, they have all kinds of stuff. But in Canada, we don't get much. But this is a 2020 Pediatric Society report. And this is interesting. When it comes to, and it reports on intercourse, oral sex, deep kissing, which is in green. The purple is sexual touch above the waist, and that's under the clothes, and sexual touch below the waist, under the clothes. When it comes to 14-year-olds, only 9% have been engaged in intercourse. 30% oral sex, 67% deep kissing, 61 and 53% sexual touch above and below the waist. As they get older, 16 years of age, the sexual activity does increase. But it's interesting to note, only 24% have engaged in intercourse. 76% have not engaged in intercourse. They've engaged in some other sexual activities, but not intercourse. Okay? This is important to keep in mind. Let's go on. So, if we're going to guide our kids across the risky waters, there's generally 2 broad approaches. One is called sexual risk avoidance. We used to call it abstinence education. Abstinence education in the 60s and 70s didn't work. It didn't. I'm saying kids need to be abstinent, yes, but we didn't teach it well. Okay? But the new abstinence is a better program. Okay? And it says youth sex is a risk, so we have to equip our youth to protect their future by understanding the negative impact of youth sex and developing skills to avoid sex until marriage, okay? The other program is called comprehensive sex ed. And comprehensive sex ed, which is what is in our schools and what is represented in our culture, and it's run and delivered, it's actually by Planned Parenthood, through the World Health Organization, United Nations, our Ontario curriculum, etc. But it's the comprehensive sex ed says people are sexual from birth. Sex is a human right, all ages, all identities, and we need to reduce the risk by teaching use of condoms. And the goal of CSE is to equip youth to have satisfying sexual relations and reduce the risk whenever possible. Yeah. That's our sex ed curriculum, the foundation of it. Okay. Where did this come from? All right. Well, people often say to me, at least those in the comprehensive sex ed world say, oh, abstinence education, you guys are just trying to teach your religion. Well, was abstinence started based on religious principles? Let's find out. When we look at the timeline for the history of sex education, in the 1920s and 1900s to 1920s, we had a problem. We had gonorrhea and syphilis were blown out of control. There was no treatment for it, okay? And the government was saying, what are we going to do? Well, the government said, we have to come up with a policy, and they came up with a policy, and that was to encourage abstinence. It was not based on religion. It was based on health, okay? Encourage abstinence until marriage to avoid getting sexually transmitted infections. When we move on to the 30s and the 50s, there are 3 significant influencers that started to influence the abstinence education approach. One was called Kinsey, Hugh Hefner, founder of Playboy magazine, and Planned Parenthood. I'd like to take a bit of a side trip, and I think it's important to understand Kinsey, okay? Who was this Alfred Kinsey? He lived in the States from 1894 to 1956, and he's credited with being the father of the sexual revolution. He was a University of Indiana researcher. He published the Kinsey Reports, Sexual Behavior of the Human Male in 1948 and Sexual Behavior of the Human Female in 1953. How did he get these reports? How did he get the data? Well, let's get a little background on him first. His background, he was bisexual as a young man. He and his wife, when they married in the 20s, he and his wife agreed, though, to have sexual relations with others. They would have an open marriage even back in the 20s. He has a PhD in biology from Harvard, and he was a very, very successful academic career as an entomologist, an insect scientist. But how did he get from insect scientist to sexologist? Well, he was doing a presentation in 1935, and he said, and he's talking about the sex life of bugs. And he says, it's interesting that we know so much about the sex life of insects, but we're ignorant about the sex life of humans. And his view was, if you delay sexual experiences, that leads to psychological harm. Well, Rockefeller Foundation found out about this and said, hey, let's give you some money to do some research. So he did his research between 1939 and 48. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to interview people to find out and create a sexuality baseline. What is normal? Well, in the 40s, where are the guys? They're at war. It's World War II. He could not get guys to survey. And the women, where were they? They were in the factories building the armaments. They didn't want to talk about sex. They didn't want to do the surveys. So his client base was overrepresented by prisoners, prostitutes, homosexuals, and pedophiles. And that's the criticism of his research. But his research still went through. And he got the sexual interests of children from pedophiles. He interviewed the pedophiles that had experiences with kids and used that data in his reporting. And he also did sexual experiments. He, his wife, the staff, and the clients observed, filmed, and participated in all kinds of sexual experiments. I've read about some of them. I'm not going to go into details, but some of them even included blood. Okay, and and he required that the people working with him were involved with these experiments so that when they did survey people, they had some understanding of those kinds of activities. Okay. In his report, this chart, table 34, talks about how 317, it reports on 317 infants and toddlers that were sexually abused by pedophiles to induce orgasms, and they used a stopwatch to find out how many times in a 24-hour period they could make the child orgasm. This is the kind of research that is in his book, okay? He claimed that he never abused the children, but the scientific research came in from pedophiles, okay? He would not divulge the source, but it's interesting to note, he used information that came in from criminal activity. The conclusions from his work, and you got to remember, these reports came out in 48 and 53, and they were widely accepted. They were criticized by many, but they were widely accepted. The conclusions from his work: humans are naturally bisexual, and some of this you're going to hear in our comprehensive sex ed programs.
Yeah.
Religious prejudices, the religious prejudices force chastity, heterosexuality, and monogamy on people. So it's because of religion we are the way we are. And they're repressing it. And we're repressing sexual interest and experiences is psychologically harmful. And children are sexual from birth, orgasmic from birth to tomb, unharmed, and benefit by incest, and psychologically harmed by not engaging in sex. Children are psychologically harmed when they do not. This is in the reports that are the foundation of comprehensive sex education. And how many times have you heard this? 10% of humans are homosexual. This is where it came from. Alfred Kinsey, in his research, which was based upon primarily prisoners and prostitutes. The influence of his work continues today. He's credited with the sexual revolution. It changed the religious influence on masturbation, monogamy, infidelity, and same-sex attractions through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Comprehensive sex ed curricula is based on sexual from birth, the sexual rights of all people, and equip child and youth to have satisfying sexual relations. Okay, so that's Kinsey. Now, Hugh Hefner, was a student in college in the 40s, actually in the early 50s, the late 40s, early 50s. He read Kinsey's report and he said, the world is lying to me about sexuality. I am going to be the pamphleteer of this message. And that's why he founded Playboy, which was the beginning of the porn industry. Planned Parenthood took his research. Planned Parenthood, until this time, had only one office, and it was in New York City. But in 1953, they used Kinsey's research to rationalize and argue for funds to spread across Canada and the United States. And in 1953, their goal, their published goal, is to be ready as educators. Yes, educators, to help young people to obtain sex before marriage. That was their published goal. In the 60s, how did this influence us? In the 60s, Planned Parenthood created SECUS and SECAN. SECUS is the Sexual Information Education Council of the United States. SECAN, Sexual Information Education Council of Canada. But guess what? They didn't have enough money. So who did they partner with to create these councils? Playboy. So this was these councils, which were to provide the research and information to guide sex ed in those countries, was founded by Planned Parenthood and Playboy. Now, we get to the next problem, okay? And the next part of our chart. By the 1990s, we have the AIDS era. We've got a problem with AIDS. We've got a problem with some increasing sexually transmitted infections, and we've got a high teen pregnancy rate. So the government is saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And what happened was that SECUS and SECAN came to them and said, we've got your answer. We'll change the curriculum. We'll put condoms in our schools. We'll teach about that, how to reduce risk, and we'll call it comprehensive sex education. And oops, there's supposed to be a red box there that says comprehensive sex education, and it's just not coming up right now. Okay, so that was the next step. Oh, there it is. Comprehensive sex education. Condoms to prevent births and to reduce STIs and to focus on the individual sexual rights. The governments embraced this and started to run with it. Okay, so abstinence education started to be taken over by comprehensive sex ed, and you can see where it came from. Okay, all right. How do you see it?
Comment?
Sorry, question?
I guess the church seems pretty absent from all of
Absolutely.
this.
Absolutely. Yeah. How does CSE get into our schools? We often blame Kathleen Wynne. Okay, Kathleen Wynne was just a tool. That's all. Okay, it all comes from Planned Parenthood through United Nations, World Health Organization. They set the policies, which then force the countries who sign on to their agreements. Okay, and that information gets transmitted through SECAN, which create the sexual health education guidelines for Canada, and that information then goes on to the provinces who create the curriculum based on it.
Wow.
Okay, so it's not Kathleen with this. This is a huge, this has a huge foundation, this problem. Okay, so, but we have to take care of our own kids, so we've got to know about this. Right? What's comprehensive sex ed? The definition: a sexual rights approach that equips young people with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that they need to determine and enjoy their sexuality physically and emotionally, individually in relationship. This is the definition. Sexual rights so that they can determine and enjoy their sexuality physically and emotionally, individually. Well, that includes being sexually active with yourself and in relationships. And that doesn't mean just one person. Comprehensive sex ed, we're going to teach sexual health and reproductive rights. And this is important. The autonomous right of the child to decide gender, orientation, and behavior. Wait a minute. What does autonomous mean?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well,
No.
I'm wondering where the parents fit into all this. There are no parents' rights.
That's right. It's entirely up to the child. Okay. And we're going to get them to reduce risk by engaging in sex consensually, using condoms, be aware of emergency contraception, abortion, and the need for to test for STIs. You know what? Kids can go, a 10-year-old can go into the pharmacy and get the morning after pill. It does not require a prescription. Okay, and non-reproductive sexual behavior, we're going to teach that in school, make kids aware of it, because, well, you can't get pregnant through anal, oral, masturbation, and cybersex. Okay, and yes, they do mention abstain from sex, but it's a very minimal part of the curriculum. Okay, develop healthy sexual relationships, which include gender identity, sexual orientation, sexual expression and behaviors, mutual satisfaction, and yes, this is in the curriculum. They're equally responsible decisions. Sex with a condom is just as responsible as abstaining from all sexual activity. That's what kids are taught.
Hey, Phil, what level is this coming in? Oh, here you are. You got it. Okay.
Yep, we're coming in. It's actually coming in right now. The new sex ed curricula. The government just released. The federal government just released the new standards, and they're talking. And we'll come to them, but this is actually coming into preschool.
Incredible.
It's coming into preschool, okay? Where we have books in preschool about animals that masturbate. Okay? We have books in preschool about genitalia. We have in kindergarten in grade 1, we have genitalia plush toys, yes? Male genitalia and female genitalia in a plush toy form, which fit together. Okay? So, but in our health and phys ed curriculum, grade 1, they're teaching about labeling genitalia. I have no problems with the kids knowing the correct names of genitalia, but I do have a problem with it being taught in a classroom experience with boys and girls together. I've spoken in British Columbia, Alberta, Manitoba, Ontario, and in Eastern provinces. And when I have, I've often asked the teachers to meet afterwards because they started teaching genitalia in grade 1 in about 2017 in those provinces. And I asked the question, what has happened? What's been the effect? And the teachers tell me it's led to increased investigation on the playground and increased sexual activity with kids in grade 1 and 2. Okay. Grade 2 and 3, understand the visible and invisible differences. Our premier said, oh no, we're going to take sexual orientation and gender identity and we're going to move it to later grades. We're not going to deal with that in grade 1, 2, and 3. No, but they changed the name to visible and invisible differences. They didn't put the term sexual orientation, gender identity. They used the term visible and invisible differences, which opens the door for teachers to talk about anything they need to. Okay. What does it look like in the classroom? Let's get to that. I think I can get that one. Hang on. There we go. Okay. I'm going to turn this up. If you can't hear it, let me know, please.
Okay.
A family can be made up in many different ways.
It's called SOGI for sexual orientation and gender identification, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid. In other words, your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment.
There's people that are boys, there's people that are girls. There are people whose gender might be a little bit of both or might even be neither.
Lessons include books about transgender children, such as 10,000 Dresses, and songs like the Rainbow Song.
Gender won't decide the choices we make. Some boys like dressing up, some girls like catching snakes.
The SOGI curriculum started in British Columbia in 2016 and is quickly spreading throughout Canada.
I just thought, who decided that this was okay to teach our children?
Author and inspirational speaker Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is a leading voice against the SOGI curriculum.
And we are seeing the results of that now, because some kids are reacting very emotionally and saying, and they're in fear. Will I suddenly struggle with feeling like a different gender inside of my body?
But Morgan Auger, a transsexual and supporter, claims it's about acceptance, not indoctrination.
The idea is to teach kids that there are gay kids and there are trans kids and there are trans parents and gay parents in our society, and everybody's wanted and desired. After all, that's what our Human Rights Code says, and it's the role of schools to teach the following of our laws.
Another blaring example, drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America, where some public schools and libraries invite drag queens, some dressed like horned demons, to read to young children.
And it's a social deconstructionist agenda. They're using children, little 5-year-olds, to accomplish this. And parents are waking up and saying no.
When asked about parents' rights, Auger says,
Well, actually, in Canada, parents' rights are limited and children's rights are put ahead. So the child has the right to be protected from the parents when the parents behave badly.
Canada is known as one of the most gay-friendly countries in the world.
So, and I'm sure many of you have seen these, some of these, or heard about the problems with some of these books in schools. This one is the most common, probably in every school across Canada. And yes, it's criticized with being pornographic. I don't know if anybody wants to jump in, have any questions or anything right now?
It's a little bit overwhelming, the extent to which this is been promulgated within the schools. But
well, it's interesting, that video that I showed you came out in 2017. It's 7 years old.
yeah,
So it's been going on in Canada for a long time.
definitely.
Okay, let's move on. All right. When it comes to grades 5 and 6, the focus is to build sexuality confidence. You know how we do that? Well, through affirming masturbation, the skills of consent for sexual activity, and how to end the relationship. The reality is, kids are going to start having relationships younger. If they do, then we need to help them to know how to end the relationship amicably. Why aren't we talking about the characteristics of the person that I would want to spend the rest of my life with, rather than how to end a relationship? That's not in the curriculum. Okay. Grade 7, ways to that you can show affection by holding hands, anal, oral, all the different methods. Abstinence is redefined. Abstinence is no longer abstaining from all sexual activity. It's sexual activities that you as an individual choose not to engage in. Your definition of abstinence is a personal definition. Okay. Grade 7, we're talking about mutually satisfying. Sexting. It's interesting. In the curriculum, it does not say don't sext. It basically says, if somebody sends you a sext, be considerate. Don't forward it on. What are we teaching? We're teaching the etiquette of sexting rather than the dangers of sexting. Okay. And communicating and negotiating consent for sexual activities and confidence in contraceptives. I want to go back to the masturbation issue. The issue of masturbation comes up, if you look at the World Health Organization guidelines, comes up all the way back to preschool and is repeated over and over and over again. And the reason for that is because, well, why is sexual activity, intercourse, going down? Because more kids are engaging through internet, cyber sex, and masturbating. And the World Health Organization figures that's a good thing. Okay. And The problem with that is that actually, in the long term, ends up having negative effect on people being able to engage intimately later on in a married family relationship. So all of this is going to end up leading to problems and reduction and the demise of family. When we get to grade 8, all of the above is reinforced and kids are expected to develop their sexual health plan. What is it they agree to do, they don't agree to do, etc. This was something that was distributed, actually it was a report in Redux, which is a feminist publication, that boys in Winnipeg were sent home with condoms, wooden phalluses, and gay pornography from school on, in other words, how to engage. And this was put on, and the mother found this, put this on Facebook, was so upset. And mothers from Ontario commented, our kids have received the same materials. I'm not saying this is in every school. But what I'm saying is we always see this happening. It comes up in a few schools, and then over a 4, 5, 6 year period, before you know it, it's everywhere. So what's been the effect of comprehensive sex ed? We've been implementing it since 1997 here in Canada. Well, what was the goal? The goal was to reduce pregnancy and to reduce STIs, sexually transmitted infections. Has it reduced pregnancy? Well, yeah, it does seem like pregnancies have gone down, but they really don't know why. Has it been because of increased condom use? They can't say. As a matter of fact, the research proves that the kids are not, it has not led to increased condom use. Has it been because of more oral sex, masturbation, internet sex? We're not sure. Has it become because kids have access to emergency contraception? And we're now actually we're not measuring pregnancy, we're measuring birth rate. And fewer kids are having births. We don't know why. Okay. So has it led to reduced pregnancy? Well, the comprehensive sex ed people like to say yes, but we don't know why for sure. What's happened with STIs though? And here's where we know the truth. 1997, this was the chlamydia rate, the most frequently reported sexually transmitted infection. 1997, okay, to 2018, there is the increase, the national average, the black line.
Right.
That's the increase for 15 to 19-year-olds, and that's the increase for 20 to 24-year-olds. So, question, has comprehensive sex ed reduced STI rates? No. And I would suggest, this has suggests to me that it's actually contributed to increased sexual activity, not necessarily intercourse, but sexual activity that does lead to transmitting STIs. So, did CSE reduce? There was a report that came out in 2019, and it looked at the 103 studies that the comprehensive sex ed people use to support their programming, and it went through and looked at them in detail, and it said only 6 actually show improvement of the 103 studies. 17 show negative effects. None of the 103 showed evidence of increased condom use. Conclusion, comprehensive sex ed is ineffective in the United States, Canada, and the international classrooms, but there's evidence for sexual risk avoidance.
Us. Oh, good. Best I can.
Sorry? Okay, I'll just move on. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so comprehensive sex ed in the 20s, the 2000s, the 20s has a result of comprehensive sex ed being implemented. There's a lot that the microscope is on it. Is this working? Teen pregnancies, yes, down, but we're not sure why. But guess what? STIs, depression, and other negative consequences are up significantly with our teens. Okay, so comprehensive sex ed has been raked over the coals. Okay, not here in Canada, in the United States. In Canada, we're going full bore. Okay, but in the States, they've been raked over the coals. Okay, and hang on a second. Okay, sexual risk avoidance then took the old abstinence programs They revised them. They made them evidence-based. They made them medically accurate. They developed new programs. They tested them, and they found that they can reduce sexual activity, pregnancy, and STIs. Okay. So as a result of this, and in the States, there's more money being put into sexual risk avoidance programs. Okay. As a result, comprehensive sex ed has come up with a new rationale,
Hello?
new ideology. Instead of improved health, here's the rationale. CCAN shows on their website, sex ed is a vehicle for social change, not improving health. And what are the areas we're going to change? Reproductive justice. This is in their documents. LGBTQ equality, sexual violence prevention. Hey, everybody's in favor of that one. Gender equity and dismantling white supremacy.
Get that in.
Yep. So that's their goal. And the guidelines, the Canadian guidelines for sex education in Canada, these are the federal guidelines. First objective, increase condom use, dental dam use, and other barrier use to prevent STI transmission. You can read through this, and it goes into detail on how we're going to get kids to know and practice how to use these different barriers for oral, anal, vaginal sex, etc. The new benchmarks for comprehensive sex ed just released in January 17th of this year. We didn't have national benchmarks until January of this year. The provinces just kind of did their own thing based on what came in through CCAN, but the new national benchmarks came in, and the summary is this: access age-appropriate sexual health education is a basic human right for all people. We're not talking just teenagers. We're talking all people from infancy to death. CSE should begin early and include a variety of relevant topics. And I won't show you all the topics, we don't have time. CSE should be inclusive, aim to reduce homophobia and transphobia, etc., and get the highlighted part, and the right to autonomous decision-making. The child's right to autonomous decision-making. That is the foundation of our federal document. In this document, it went through and it listed all of the benchmarks. I'll just give you an example of one because we just don't have time to go through them all. One of them in kindergarten. In kindergarten, we used to teach the term consent, not for sex. We use the term consent when asking, instead of saying permission to play a game or whatever, we use the term consent in kindergarten because in grade 5, 6, 7, we're going to use the term consent for sexual activity. So we want to introduce the consent language in kindergarten, right? But now, instead of just teaching the term consent for permission, the benchmark says to teach consent for sexual activity in kindergarten. And the reason for that? Well, when we found out we're teaching about genitalia in grades 1 and 2, and that's led to increased activity on the playground, sexual activity on the playground. So we have to teach kids, they have to ask for consent. Anyway, comprehensive sex ed is not working, and it's proven it's not working. But here in Canada, we're going full bore. Sexual risk avoidance in the States is the premise is youth sex has risks. Most youth are not sexually active. Most are not engaging in intercourse. The majority of sexually experienced youth, the research shows, regret for the sexual activity. More than 2/3 of kids who are sexually active, when they're surveyed by Barna, say they regret. They didn't know they could say no. They didn't know how to avoid it, how to get around it. And so our kids need the knowledge and skills to protect their future by avoiding the risks. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all of the key topics, okay? but it starts with identifying their personal goals and values. What are the negative impact of non-marital sex? The benefits of avoiding. What is the purpose of sex? What's its purpose long term? And it's interesting. We can talk about God's intended purpose for sex, but when we look, and we have a session called The Body Speaks, and when we look at the biological anatomy associated with sex, okay, and we say what happens outside of the lifelong married situation, the biology proves and supports the guidelines in scripture. Okay. So, and then what's the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships? And how do you focus on developing healthy relationship that could lead to finding that lifelong marital partner? And then how to protect your future by establishing boundaries, avoiding tempting circumstances, and developing refusal skills. So that's basically the outline. Does it work? The research shows, 25 peer-reviewed studies, that SRA classes are more likely to lead to delayed sexual initiation. Okay. And if kids are sexually active and they take these programs, they're more likely to discontinue. We've seen that in Hawaii with our programs, even with our extreme at-risk kids. Last class we did, we had 5 kids come up to our male instructor and said, "Sir, we really want to change our lives this way. Could we get your PowerPoint images? And would you," they asked, these are 16-year-olds, asked, "Would you mentor us? Would you meet with us and keep us accountable?" They asked him, and he didn't make that suggestion.
Well,
so if we have 2 approaches, sexual risk avoidance is the healthiest approach. Who should be guiding our kids? Well, there's 3 general sources: secular society, culture, schools, internet, porn, media, parents and family, and faith community. And the research shows the most effective agents of influence are parents and family and faith community, but they tell us they don't feel equipped. So that's where peace fits in. When we look at what the kids tell us, what are the teens saying? 40%, this is a Barna study, 40% say that sex ed classes, they felt pressure to have sex. The majority regret their sexual activity. The majority didn't know they could say no. 87% of these kids, these are sexually active kids that were surveyed, and they said 87% of them said they wish their parents had been equipped to guide them. And 75% of these kids, these were not church kids, said that they believed the church should play a greater role. There's our marching orders, right? Okay, so sexual risk avoidance, optimal health. So this is what we do here at Peace. We have two primary programs. First, we have our youth program called Heritage Keepers. We didn't develop it. It was developed in the States, was developed by Heritage Community Services. It's for youth ages 11 to 18, and it was tested by Mathematica in a 4,000 student study. 2,500 kids took the program, 1,500 kids in a well-matched control group. They surveyed those kids 12 months after the program. The kids that were in the program engaged in sex at a rate of 67% less than the non-program kids. So this program works. I did some post-grad work researching the different programs. This is the one that seems to be the most effective. And in the States, there are all kinds of programs, but this one is the most effective. Family Foundations. Medical Institute for Sexual Health used to have a parenting program that we were certified in and we delivered, but I had I saw all kinds of holes in it, and I talked to them about it. Anyway, the person who was the president of Medical Institute at the time, 2 years ago, called me and said, "Phil, can we get together? Let's develop a new program." So we developed this Family Foundations program. It's actually 3 of us, 2 from the States and myself. And it's biblically aligned, it's research-based, and the goal is to equip parents to guide their youth toward optimal sexual health. It has 9 modules, and overall, it's about an 8-hour program. Here are the modules, okay? And you can go down through all God's design for sex, puberty, etc. The last one, 9, advocacy, I'm going to come back to, okay? All right, advocacy is is an important one, but we have to start by engaging our parents to take and our churches to take responsibility. Okay, so and we delivered this program online for Action for Canada back last fall. We got very positive feedback, and this church, Heritage Green in Stony Creek, has asked us to do it as a parent conference. So it's coming up April 19-20, and we're going to do the whole program, and it's going to include, and Lori from Texas, who used to be the president of the Medical Institute, she spent for sexual health, she spent almost 25 years in the sexual health area for youth. I got to tell you, this lady knows her stuff, well experienced. She's got, and I can't remember the name of the women's group, but there's an international women's group. She is their sexual health expert. She's working with 2 countries in Europe and Guatemala right now, developing healthy sexual risk avoidance programs for those countries. Okay. Then Pastor Dave Willweber, who is actually my partner in Hawaii, and he's the one that leads the project in Hawaii. Myself will be delivering. And just yesterday, Liz Milliken, who is a registered psychotherapist in Toronto, and she's a specialist in gender identity, is going to come to the conference. She is going to present to parents how you can guide your kids on this gender identity issue, even though the government says, even though we're afraid that we're going to get put in jail. Okay. So how should, maybe I'm going to stop there before I do the advocacy part. Can I stop there? And
yes, by all means,
anybody
open
have
that
any
up.
questions?
Yeah. Questions or comments? There's a lot of very important information there, Phil. I appreciate what you've done. This is amazing work, but it's very disturbing. But I'll open it up for comments or questions at this point.
Yeah, and because I want to get to the advocacy part, because the title of this is toward the culture of sexual integrity. So how do we start to move the ship? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Phil,
Yeah.
I have a question for you. The Stony Creek conference that you're talking about in April, is that primarily aimed at whom?
Okay, good question. We build it as parents and church youth leaders. However, we've got grandparents coming. We got today. Grandparents often have more influence over their grandkids' lives than the parents do. Okay, anybody that has influence over the lives of children. Okay.
And will some of that be recorded as well, Phil? Or...
Actually, it's going to be available online as well.
Okay.
So it's in person, online. If you go to eventbrite.ca and you just search truth about sex, it comes up, and it's online as well. We will be recording it, and for anybody that registers, it will be available for about 2 months after the program.
Right. Excellent. And well, certainly, I think I've got all of your emails, but if you're not sure, put it in the chat. And I did mention I've got the digital copy of the Peace Ontario Parent Support Guide, and you're welcome to that as well. I can send that to anyone that's participated here.
Great. Yeah, and everybody's going to get that at the conference as well.
Excellent. That's a very valuable resource, and I appreciate the amount of research the team of you have done is invaluable. That question, well, two, where have our MPs been, provincial and federal? And obviously the question about where have our church leaders been? And I guess also teachers. Are there, within the teaching profession, there must be some level of revulsion or unease about what they're being asked to do.
Okay,
is there anyone that's really helping those people? Okay,
let's start with the MPs. Let's start with the MPs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
You might remember back in 2019, Ford came out as part of his election. We're going to have a review of the sex ed curriculum. Okay.
Correct.
So they went through, they had this huge multi-million-dollar project They went around all around the province. I worked with a PhD researcher. I worked with 3 other people. We put together a document that basically said this: we live in a multi-worldview society. Okay, we have to understand that there are people in our culture, Don, that have no problem with this sex ed curriculum for the kids. Okay, and I have to accept that. Okay, so we put together a dual program approach document, and we came up with a way that we could offer both a comprehensive sex ed and a sexual risk avoidance approach in every school in the province of Ontario, and allow parents to choose which one they want for their kids. And then over a 5-year period, let's follow the research. What happens? How does this work? Okay. I met with 23 MPPs about this project before the end of the as part of this. Every single one of them said, this is a win-win, Phil, for everybody.
Yeah.
And I got all kinds of support one-on-one. And then what happens though is all of the data came in, and there was a lot of information that came in from families, from faith families that were concerned about the sex ed curriculum. And then it went back to the original, most of them were the original authors that wrote the 2015 curriculum. They were the ones that were given the responsibility to filter through all of the information. And the curriculum actually didn't change. As a matter of fact, in some cases, it's worse.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, they did put the word marriage in. It's buried, though, in grade 5. It's buried in a possible question. You know, if a child asks the question, well, some people think marriage is a better way. You know, what do you think? The teacher is supposed to say, yes, you're right. There are people that think that. And we need to accept and respect that. That is all that is taught about marriage. That's it.
Yep.
So, okay, so that's the MP's side. When it comes to the teachers, okay, we had a project in Durham region just before COVID.
Yeah.
For 2.5 years, I was operating out of a large church in Oshawa, and we had about 20 churches involved. And when we trained the parents on how to build relationship with the child's teacher, how to build relations with the churches, to build relationship with the school, etc. Then it got to, and I'll get to this in a minute when we do the advocacy component. Then when it came time for the parents to go in and talk about their concerns with the sex ed curriculum, it actually led to changes in the way the curriculum was delivered in many of those schools. It didn't change the curriculum document, but it changed at the ground level. Because what would happen is the parents would go in, and we have an overall letter that parents can take in that and again, it's a very relationship building approach. It just says, we want to share what our faith needs are, what the learning needs are for our kids, and ask to be informed if curriculum, and it was very specific about the components of the curriculum. When this is part of planned instruction, could you let me know so that I can talk to my child before and after? It didn't say, I want to opt out or anything. It just said, I want to be informed. And then along with the letter came the research that supported their positions. And the teachers often said, and we got responses back from parents and from teachers that said, I didn't realize this. I'm going to change the way in which I deliver my curriculum. So, and that's how we begin a grassroots change. But I got to tell you, Don, we need to get our churches on board.
Amen.
Because that's where our people are.
Yeah, no, definitely. It needs to be a targeted program to churches, to church leaders, youth leaders. This is serious business. The next generation is at risk here.
Now, one thing that we're doing, okay, this 9 modules, Lori and Dave and Liz, we're getting together 3 days before the conference. We're setting up, we're in a studio. We're going to studio record all of the sessions. We're going to record the conference. And then the guy that's doing the editing, he's going to insert some of the live conference components in the studio presentations. But we're going to put this together. Our goal is, as long as we currently have the funds, but this conference is costing me a bundle to try and get promoted right now.
Right.
But we want to put this together into a package. And then in the fall, we will have certification training so that people can be trained to use these resources. They'll also get the PowerPoints. And as they become more comfortable, they can be delivering the program instead of using the videos. Or use the video. So that's our goal. We need to replicate ourselves. We want to train people in the churches. Somebody told me, actually, it was Van Johnson. I don't know if you know Van Johnson. What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Van Johnson, he's within Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada. He does the master's programs at Tyndale. Anyway, he told me almost 30 years ago, no, 25 years ago, he said, Phil, if you want to get into the churches, you're going to have to get certified get certification within the PAOC. I said, that is so sad, Van, that we've got the answer, but it's an old boys club, and I can't get this information to your parents because I'm not an old boy. Well, I am now, but anyway, I wasn't then. So our goal is, let's get people in those old boys clubs certified and trained and take the information in there. Okay.
Yeah, good strategy. I will certainly put all the information related to that conference and any resources you may be sharing to the Oak Center distribution list as well, so we can get that word out through the network.
Super. Okay. Do you mind if I move on to the?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Next part. Okay. The last part of the 9 modules is when we get to module 8, people are just flying. They're really upset, as you guys may be. I mean, I've given you an overview of the information, but when we get into the risks, we get right down to what do these STIs look like and all the rest of it, right? And people are just flying. Okay. How should we respond? Do we put the boxing gloves on and protest outside Queen's Park? I got to tell you, when we've done that, media has made us look stupid. And although we're there for the right reasons, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where the media works against us. Okay? Or do we stick our heads in the sand and pretend it's not happening? That's what many of us are doing. How do we respond? When we answered this question for ourselves, we looked at scripture. And in Luke 10, what are the biblical principles for social influence? In Luke 10, when Christ sent out the 72, okay, he sent them out ahead of him to prepare the way. And what did he say to them? He sent them out as he said, go 2 by 2, not by yourselves. There's safety in numbers. And he sent them out, he said, as lambs to the wolves in verse 3. But then he said in verse 5, whatever house you enter, first say peace be to this house. Speak blessing. Bless, don't blast. We need to bless, not blast. We need to build relationship. So we bless them. Verse 7, stay in that house. Eat and drink whatever they give you. Sit down, fellowship, build relationship. Verse 9, you find out about them. You get to know them. They tell you their problems. Heal their sick. Meet their needs. And then when they come back and say, wow, this was fantastic. You know what happened? I'm feeling better. My wife is healed, whatever. Then say to them, the kingdom of God has come near. Proclaim God is near and involved in this. So we use this approach. Okay. Transform Our World calls it prayer evangelism, okay? So to build relationship, we have a 5-step process. First steps, number 1, on the sex ed issue. And again, let's influence in the education in the sex ed because that's somewhere we have an opportunity. As a matter of fact, there are policies in Ontario we don't use. There is a religious accommodation policy that every school board in the province of Ontario, as a matter of fact, across Canada, has to embrace. And we can use that policy to ask that are the learning needs of our kids will be properly considered, right? But step 1, we have to understand the facts associated with the sex ed issue. I've given you some of those today, okay? Understand the facts. Next, while you're understanding the facts, build relationship with your child's teachers, okay? And we have a number of ways of doing that. I got a story. A pastor used to be at our church. He was the youth pastor, went to Brampton. And he was doing this in our own church. When he went to Brampton as the associate pastor, big church, his first day on the job, he went across the road to the school and asked the principal, can we have an appointment? I want to take you out for lunch. Took the principal out for lunch and said, hey, we both care about the kids in our community. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve in your school? He didn't start criticizing. He said, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And they said, how can we help? Within 3 months, that church had 40 seniors excited about working with the kids in that school to help them with their reading skills, help them with their sports, help them with achieve goals, etc. Okay. And then Pink Shirt Day came up in the February. And the pastor went to Pink Shirt Day. And Pink Shirt Day is supposed to be anti-bullying day. But what's the group that was delivering the anti-bullying message? It was the LGBT community. So everything was about transgenderism, sexual orientation, all the rest of it. So what did the pastor do? The next week, he called the principal and said, hey, can I take you out for lunch? He didn't rip the principal apart. He said, I love this idea of Pink Shirt Day being anti-bullying. Do you think we could expand it next year to include bullying for a child being tall, a child being skinny, glasses, etc., including maybe their choices around sexual orientation? For the next 5 years, that church ran the Pink Shirt Day. Okay, so churches adopting schools. All right, so develop relationship. Number 3, before engaging with the school on the learning needs of your child and being concerned about the sex ed curriculum, be sure your children are getting the healthy sexual risk avoidance message. So we've got the resources to help parents to start guiding their kids, okay? And then once you've done that, and your child is hearing that message, and your child is agreeing with the message, then we've got resources to help the parents to communicate their faith needs and the child's learning needs. There's something in education called differentiated learning. It is a philosophy that every teacher knows about. And differentiated learning says this: children learn best when they are taught in an environment and from a perspective that is in alignment with their life experiences. So our communication to the school shares the life experiences of our kids, the faith needs of our kids. It then has all the research, including the education policies, etc., that support our requests. And then it just says, I'm not saying I want my kid to opt out. I'm just saying, of all of these sensitive topics in the sex ed curriculum, could you inform me when it's being taught ahead of time so that I can talk to my child about it? And if it's something that we are required to abstain from as a faith community, then we'll work with you to try and work around that. Okay? So that's the approach we take. I said to you that in Durham region before COVID, we spent 2 years doing this with about 20 churches. And following this approach, there was some positive improvement and some positive change in the schools and development of understanding of the faith needs of the faith community. And that's what we need, and that's what we need to be involved with. Am I blowing smoke,
Excellent.
guys?
No, no, it's very, very helpful, very detailed, very informed, and it's been developed through a lot of experience and working with people on the front end. But Phil, any other comments? I'd be glad to open up for others who would like to ask questions or learn more about peace. I'll certainly make a lot of this information available to those who've attended and others in the next update I do. And do thank you, Phil, for your incredible passion and commitment to really getting the information out in the way that we need. Yeah, that's a good graphic there to keep in front of us. Yeah, so I'll open it up. Anyone would like to ask questions or make comments? Jonathan.
Yeah, Phil, thank you very much. It is horrifying to see what's gone on. I mean, it's not. I'm aware of some of this, but it is shocking, and to see the work of the devil and getting and destroying our young people, our children. What are your comments in regards to most, like a lot of the folks in our church are in the Christian schools or private schools, home schools, and so forth, which in some ways removes them a little bit from the concern, not necessarily concern, but involvement, say, in the public school situation. Yep. So maybe just comment a little bit about that. And the other, along with that, I mean, some of the so-called Christian schools are really slipping also and allowing, under pressure, allowing a lot of the sex eds to sort of sneak in, the LGBT, transgender. I mean, it's quite horrifying to see what's happening there. Just sort of your comments around that and how we should be, how we should be responding, I guess, given that. I mean, yeah.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Our Christian schools are only 10 years away from being where the public schools are right now. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate saying things like that. Okay, because I've been involved in this almost 30 years, and I go to Hawaii and something happens and I said, okay, 3 years from now, this is the next step. This is the next, and I go to Hawaii and I'm labeled a prophet. I'm no prophet. I just understand the continuum. That's all. So I think the Christian schools, you're looking at 10 years. And as you say, some of them have slipped, are slipping. I really believe if you want to maintain, and I'm not going to say a biblical perspective, I believe that's I'm sorry, and pastors hate it when I say this, but I believe if you only teach sex ed curriculum from a biblical perspective, you're sending the kids out to the wolves because they don't know how to defend themselves in that and secular environment. They need, and I'm going to just share a testimony from an 11-year-old. We have that youth program, okay, the curriculum, okay, sex ed curriculum. We deliver it in a weekend. I had an 11-year-old come up to an instructor and say, thank you so very much, because I'm leaving here with 2 languages. If I'm being propositioned, and this is an 11-year-old, if I'm being propositioned by somebody outside the church, I can defend my position with the science, the research, the medical information. If I'm being propositioned by somebody inside the church, I can defend my position with the science, the medicine, and the biblical. And we need both components in our sex ed curriculum. And our Christian, and if you want to preserve that, you need to get a healthy sexual risk avoidance education program being delivered in your schools. So I really believe that. And we've got the Heritage Keeper program. There's another one that we're bringing, I think we're going to bring to Canada called Choosing the Best. And I would love to get, if we could get 20, if we get 20 people that want to be certified in the Heritage Keeper program, okay? The Heritage Keeper program is an expensive program to get certified in. We don't make it, we don't charge the fees. They do, but we can run a program up here. If we had 20 people, we could train them for $700 per person. If you want to get trained down in South Carolina, it's $1,600 US plus your flight, plus your hotel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But we've had trainings here in Canada, and if we can get 20 people, we can do it for about $700 per person. So.
Let's, yeah, go ahead, Isaac, please.
I guess to be effective in the program and take the training, ideally you need to be connected with either a church organization or a homeschooling organization, because otherwise would they come and ask for the program? Is there demand enough?
I think you're right, Isaac. To be, if you wanted to take the Heritage Keeper, that's our youth sex ed curriculum training.
Right.
You're better off to get somebody that's connected. You know, let's say somebody in the church community that's also going to deliver it in their church, and maybe the other churches in their denomination in the community. Okay. You know, so youth pastors, you know, people that are, you know, people connected to youth. The program we're going to be delivering in Stony Creek, that is for parents, that is for, and to be perfectly honest, what's my goal for this? Well, one, I want to train and equip parents, absolutely. Right. But I want to get people from Perry Sound, Aurelia, and we've got people coming from Aurelia, okay? I want to get people coming from different communities, even different communities in Hamilton, that get fired up by this. And they want to take the certification training in the fall and then be able to take our materials, the videos, the PowerPoints, and start delivering it in their schools, in their communities to parents, in their churches to parents, etc.
Do you have like a podcast or so where you're doing this kind of thing also right now, like what you're doing here, maybe in shorter sections?
I don't have a podcast, but we do have YouTube videos. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, we can provide some of those links for sure.
Yeah.
Two quick questions. Just to follow up on that, what's the YouTube channel?
Okay, if you go to YouTube, you go to Peace Education Services, okay, and if you go to the and you'll get all the videos and the channels, but you go Targeting Success for Youth. Actually, Jerry, if you could send me my email is info@peaceontario.com. Send email, I'll send you the links. Okay.
I'll connect you there, yeah, for sure.
Peace. Okay. And send them to Don as well, so that he'll send it to everybody here.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Super.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you do that, then I won't have to send you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And do that. Just send that to Don. The question I had to do with the teachers, Christian teachers, who are in the public school system. Many of them already feel very uncomfortable with the curriculum they're asked to teach, not just in sex ed, but this, idea of the kids being autonomous and, the desire to change society is permeating all sorts of parts of the curriculum. So a lot of teachers aren't comfortable with that. But at the same time, we don't want to abandon the public school system and have no Christian influence there. What advice do you have for Christian teachers who are in the public school system?
Just keep your head low. And that's what most of them are doing. Okay. Yeah. They're staying low. They're staying, I wouldn't say quiet, because I mean, they're talking to their own kids, right? But they're looking at the curriculum, like the sex ed and the gender identity, etc. And they are massaging it in a way and delivering it like, Oh, yes, we need to respect everybody's choices and stuff like that without being advocates for celebrating these differences, okay? And there are lots of Christian teachers out there that are doing that. They're doing it well, okay? And yet there are lots of teachers out there that are leaving the system. And I got to tell you, one of the best ways we can support these teachers is in a community. If we have teachers going, if we have parents going through this process and then going into the school and talking to the teacher about the sex ed curriculum, I can't tell you, I've talked to a number of teachers. They said, do you know, as a Christian teacher, do you know how encouraging that is to me?
You're not on their own. Yeah.
Yep. It is so encouraging. And we, as you know, to have a church, you know, take the principal out, what can we do to help? Have that church get seniors in that school, volunteering, helping the kids, etc., and not going in and evangelizing, but going in with, you know, with righteous character, okay? And at times when something happens that's, you know, insulting or questionable, even very politely saying, do you think that's the best way to do things? You know, I just do it. And again, people need to be trained on how to respond in that environment in a, you know, let's go back to the Luke 10 approach. Okay. And, but we are, as a Christian community, we are hanging these teachers out to dry.
Yeah, I'm sure they feel very alone and isolated. I don't know if they are ways they can organize within the profession itself, kind of a subset of Christian teachers, but I can see they'd be very difficult if you're just on your own trying to deal with these issues.
It is.
And what's striking from the early history is what incredible amount of money and resources were put in to this whole change of worldview. Like it was insidious and pervasive and extremely well funded, you know, from the 20s on.
Yep.
So that whole history needs to be understood, and I guess also then strategies to undo that damage or present a positive alternative.
Now, we got to be careful with the idea of undoing, okay? Because if we go in with the feeling that we have to undo, the door gets slammed shut.
Yeah, let's take one. Yeah.
If we go in and say, we want to be part of an inclusive community, but that means, can we share what our needs are? Okay.
Yeah, it's a winsome way to do it.
That's right. That's right. We have to be winsome. We have to take the inclusive policies of the public school curriculum, our public school policies, and use them to our advantage.
Yeah.
Not to criticize others, but to share what our needs are.
Be articulate and informed about that, and that makes a big difference.
Yes. Yes.
You've mentioned the sexual risk aversion program several times and said that parents need to go through that. Yeah, can you hear me? Fine?
Yeah, you're good. You're good, Joe.
Okay. You said, you know, when informing parents, they should go through that before anything. And just in name, I assume that's the program you offer, but in name, it sounds no different from a humanistic program teaching, go out, enjoy your pleasure to the fullest extent, and here's how you make sure you don't have consequences.
Hang on,
I'm assuming that's not what it is.
No. That you're talking about the comprehensive sex ed program. There's two programs.
No, I'm talking about what you said that you offer, which is a sexual risk aversion program.
Sexual risk avoidance.
Sexual risk avoidance. And in name, that sounds to me like somebody, you know, saying this is how you enjoy these things without the risk of, you know, different things. Whereas from Christian perspective, sex is for inside marriage, and the avoidance is avoiding it until marriage in a moral way.
So you're saying that there could be a better term used instead of sexual risk avoidance.
Or I'm asking, what is that program? Is it what it sounds like, or is it what I'm assuming it would be?
Here, let's go back to, here you go. Here are the key topics, okay? So in our sexual risk avoidance program, Heritage Keepers, and any program, it includes these key topics. Number one, identify your personal goals and what are your values. What's the negative impact of non-marital sex on your goals? So negative impact of youth sex on your goals. What's the negative impact? What are the benefits of avoiding sex as a youth? Better academic achievement, earning potential, better physical. So the whole program goes through this. What's the purpose of sex? Healthy versus unhealthy sex. So what's the difference between lust, love, and infatuation? What are the characteristics of the person you would want to spend the rest of your life with? This is I find this the most exciting part of the course. When we get to this point, the kids are pretty excited. Okay, so what would be the characteristics of the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? And so we get these characteristics coming in. We might have 30, 40 of them on the board. And then we say to the kids, now list the 10 that you would find most important. And then why? Okay. And then we get them to narrow that down to 6. So these 6 are your primary filter. So when you go out on some kind of and then we get into planning dates and experiences. It could be group situations, etc., without sex. Understanding the characteristics of the person that you would be looking for in that situation, maybe you will find that person. And then what might be the next step, okay? And then how to protect your future by establishing boundaries. So what kind of situations would you avoid? Any parties where there's drinking, any parties where there's etc. So identify those boundaries so that you avoid tempting circumstances. And then if you're put into a situation where somebody is encouraging you to engage in an at-risk activity, what would be your refusal skills? Develop those refusal skills. And we actually put the kids we give them skit topics and they rehearse, because just like in sports, how do you get good at it? By practicing. So they rehearse in situations and explain why I'm not going to go to this party. What are my boundaries? Why are those boundaries? What is the research that supports my boundaries, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a sexual risk avoidance program. The idea of, avoiding the risk of sexual activity.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. I must have missed when you explained it all together in the
Well, we went
lecture
through
here.
pretty fast. We went through pretty fast.
Yeah, I think we can also make available the PowerPoint from this.
Sure.
That would be good. I've got all of your, I've got yours, Jackson, and I think, Marie, sure, if I don't have your email, I'll just put it in the chat and I'll make sure you get this information. Other comments? Those are good points. Lots to consider, and definitely a call to action, thoughtful, prayerful action, and informed. And we really need to do our homework here. And I think you're right about engaging the grandparents, the older. There's a whole generation here that I think could be called into action to help things. And you've developed, I think, a strategy there for engagement with the local schools. I mean, there's Christian principles of those schools. How do we come alongside and help them? And we are, and then on the political level, we do need to get more accountability at all levels as to what's really going on.
I don't think you're going to get change at the political level unless you are equipping and informing and equipping at the local level. Okay,
for sure.
And people moving at the local level.
Yep.
You're not going to get change. You're not going to get politicians moving.
Correct. It's definitely grassroots. We need some. Well, thank you, Phil, very much. As this is Holy Thursday, and we'll be going into worship and celebration of Christ's amazing sacrifice to really make all things new. And let's proceed in that hope that Christ is at work in us and in our community and in ways that will be transformative for the good. Again, thank you so much, and I'll make sure the material gets circulated from here, and I'll also have updates in terms of other events that you're going to be involved with, Phil. So do appreciate your just dedication and the the skill to which you've brought together all this information. You've done your homework, and sounds like Hawaii and in the States, there's some really great test beds where this has been proven now to be very effective. And if we can get more
Absolutely.
information about those situations, that would be very helpful as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much.
All
for the
right.
opportunity to share.
Blessings.
Thanks a lot.
Yes. All right.
Bless you guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, Jerry, good to see you. We'll talk soon again.
How do I get